Come into this sacred time and space, many strands coming together into one article, woven together for a time. Our hearts open with the spring call of the chickadees. Our hearts lift with the shifting light. Our hearts are heavy with remembering and worry. We rejoice, we sigh, we cry, and we know that this time and space can hold it all, hold us all, however the moment finds us. In joy and in woe, we turn to one another. Come, let us worship together. I'm the Reverend Rachael Hayes, minister of this congregation. I use she, her pronouns. I am so glad that you are here today. Today we commemorate the 5-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic. Take that in. Yeah. During our Time for All Ages, we will have a ritual with colored yarn. If you're joining us online, you may want to have multiple colors of yarn, including a black one, or paper and coloring supplies, something for you to make some meaning without words. I invite you to say our congregation's chalice lighting words with me. We light this flame to invite a world of peace, where we heal the wounds, where we share what we have with one another, where justice is another word for relationship, and we listen for what love has to say. I invite you to rise in body and spirit to sing our opening hymn, Gathered Here, which is on the screen, and number 389 in the gray hymnal. I invite you, gathered here in the mystery of this hour, to join me in reciting our congregation's covenant. Love is the spirit of this community. We dwell together in peace. We seek truth and justice in love. We honor everyone's worth and dignity, and we do the work of building the beloved community in our world. 5 years ago was a before and after moment in our culture. Though we all had our individual experiences of the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, our own details of school and work and community, this moment of change happened to all of us. I invite you to pause for a moment to remember whatever memories come up. We're going to do a ritual, and I wonder if I could have some helpers to help me pass out this black yarn. It's really exactly that complicated. Does anybody want to? Yeah? Everybody gets one. They're not all quite the same size. You can make whatever meaning of that suits you. Let's see. Thank you, Libby. Woo! They're going wherever they're going. Okay. Thank you. So as you hold the black yarn, think of what it meant to you when everything shut down. Oh, Kat, could I have a couple? Oh, yeah. Okay. Think of what it was like when everything shut down for you. Who were you with? What changed for you? And then think of what else happened for you in this time. Remember the things you did and the events in your life since then. We can't talk about the last 5 years without thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic. But somehow all the rest of our lives continued to happen. We called our friends and grew gardens and baked bread. People fell in love and got married. Babies were born. People died of all sorts of causes. I talked right over top of you, didn't I? So when you are ready, come up, remembering these things, select a couple more colors of yarn that are on the draped over the pews here, and tie them onto this line on the north wall of our sanctuary. So maybe yours looks something like this. Or another group of colors. But just whatever it is for you. And as Brenda plays the music, we will hang colors on the wall for this time in our lives. So as I look at all of our colors together, I see so many ways of tying them onto the line, see so many different groups of color, and some people did different things with their yarn. And though we had so much in common, we all had our own individual experiences as I look back on that. So many stories untold or told visually in that line. Our reading is from Auguries of Innocence by William Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. It is right, it should be so. Man was made for joy and woe, and when this we rightly know, through the world we safely go. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. Years ago, I signed up for a Zen weaving session at a weaving studio in New York City. I sat down to the loom, which was already warped and ready for me to begin weaving, and I was a little bit disappointed that the warp threads, the vertical threads I would be weaving into, were black. I'm sure it's not a surprise to you that I love color, and why of all colors the warp threads would be black, I didn't understand. It seemed arbitrarily dark. But the studio said that a black warp makes colors pop the most, and a white warp makes the colors soft and muted. The warp threads are the constant in the weaving, staying solid as the weft colors change with the weaver's impulse. It surprised me how bright a weaving could be when half of the threads in it were black. The greens and purples shone through clearly. I played with accents of neon brights. I worked white in among the colors, and it changed the balance of light and dark. Nothing was lost. Every fluff, sparkle, and shade, all held together, many fibers combined into one piece, each thread necessary to the whole. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. We remember today that it has been 5 years since the first COVID-19 shutdown in the US. Everything changed. COVID-19 has become a regular, if still troublesome, part of our lives, one of many circulating illnesses. We are at the point that epidemiologists told us would come We may debate whether COVID or flu or RSV or another illness is more of a concern at a particular point in time, but we live with it now, just as we were told that we someday would. COVID-19 has become a regular part of our lives in other ways too. 5 years on, it's estimated and probably underestimated that 7 million people, which translates to a whole large city or state, small state, have died of COVID worldwide. And we live with these losses. That is roughly 1 person per 1,000 in our world, a huge loss in our human story. Each of those people had loved ones who mourned them, had hopes and dreams, had a unique perspective lost to the world. It's also estimated that twice as many people have struggled or continue to struggle with long COVID symptoms after COVID infection, in some cases resulting in life-changing disability and chronic medical conditions. Long COVID is part of our lives, just like the original infection. Over time, scientists learned more about the disease, gave us helpful guidance, taught us which masks were useful in which circumstances, gave us effective vaccines that changed the severity of infection. We got vaccinated to protect ourselves and one another. We still monitor our local COVID infection rates and wear masks in the sanctuary when the risk is elevated. Today's children and emerging adults have had a different path through developmental milestones than those of us who were already adults 5 years ago. Virtual schooling, different modes of socialization, and a very limited in-person community during formative years have led parents, educators, and those who work with children and emerging adults to note that many are still catching up on social and emotional learning and also some academic basics. The precautions we took to keep one another safe were not without cost. The loss of in-person work and socialization contributed to the so-called loneliness epidemic in our already highly individualistic culture. Many struggled with mental health and addiction. The feelings of powerlessness brought up old traumas for some and made this period of isolation a traumatic experience for others. In those early weeks, the rules for grocery shopping seemed to change every month or so. Everything was in flux. It was hard to rely on anything. We didn't know how the virus moved at the beginning, and so we took every precaution imaginable to prevent it. Here at UUSA, we stopped holding services in person, and in the span of a week, moved our whole operation, services, meetings, fundraisers, religious education, everything, entirely onto Zoom until we could strategize more tailored approaches. And all of this experience has become part of who we are, but it's not all we are. We carry with us everything we had been until that moment as well, and the virus is not the only thing that happened in the last 5 years. Children were born, loved ones died of many causes, not just COVID-19. We met milestones just the same, first words and first steps, birthdays, graduations, retirements, marriages, new friendships, heartbreaks, diagnoses, crises. People moved, joined, and left the congregation, each one a thread in the weaving. And there are some communal threads that continue. While we were unable to hold services in person, we hosted Craig Store's congregate shelter in our social hall. We housed 14 people in our building for months at a time. And though the shelter is now housed by our neighbors at Emmanuel Lutheran Church, north of UMass, their time here was the beginning of Craig Store's offering round-the-clock shelter. I am so proud that we could be part of that story. This thread continues. It continues to save lives in our community. Our congregation's technological capacity has deepened profoundly since the first lockdown. Separated from one another in person, we found each other on Zoom. Now we are able to host fully multi-platform services in our sanctuary. We can host guest speakers from anywhere in the world, and people can access our services from anywhere in the world too. Our members have accessed Sunday services while traveling or living abroad, and sometimes given us joys and sorrows updates on that journey. People can attend services from home when they aren't able to join us in person because of health, disability, timing, or simply needing a pajama morning. This means that most of our services are also recorded and available on YouTube now. Most of the newcomers who find our congregation have watched some of our videos to know what to expect before they ever arrive. More than ever, the internet is our front door. We can share our welcome with the world in new ways. This technological growth, though it requires some work, is another bright thread. And of course, our entire preschool and nursery enrollment is children who were born in the last 5 years. I cannot imagine our congregation without these vibrant young people. We may not see them upstairs very often, but they too are dazzling threads in the weaving of these last 5 years. We remember these things because we come here to make meaning of our lives in community. This is a story of loss and resilience and beauty found by the wayside. There is no explaining away the pain. I will not tell you, now or ever, that it was part of some deity's plan. If there's a God worth believing in, I find it hard to believe that they would plan for us to suffer. But I will remind you that there is a story of perseverance here. There are the lessons we learned and the blessings we found, even while we lived through circumstances we could not have imagined beforehand. And it might also help to remember these things because for some of us, right now feels, in some ways, like back then. We found ourselves stuck, not knowing what was coming next, waiting for advice and wisdom from somewhere, anywhere, looking for experts in a time everyone called unprecedented. Some of us have felt this way since the election in November, or even more in the 2 months, and it's not quite 2 months yet since the inauguration. What to do, where to turn, how to make sense. It's different, but in some ways the same. William Blake, in 18th century language, said, "Man was made for joy and woe. And when this we rightly know, through the world we safely go." And that line has always bugged me. It doesn't feel like we're going very safely. In terms of the pandemic, 7 million people died, and more have experienced life-changing long COVID. In international politics, conflicts continue. Here in the US, we are experiencing both fresh and ongoing assaults on the lives and rights of immigrants, transgender people, people of color, disabled people, queer people, poor people, women. It's a long list, and a lot of us don't feel especially safe. But we learned that we can't will ourselves to safety through whatever privilege we have. Just as when we were confronting a new disease we didn't understand, we are painfully aware that we are all at risk again, that our democracy is under attack, and sacrificing any group most under threat does not make us safer. Blake's poem is named Auguries of Innocence, and I have come to believe that in letting go of this innocence, there is something better than safety. We cannot protect only ourselves from woe. Tragedies, crises, pandemics, coups, they come to all of us, even if they don't hit us all the same. When we let go of the innocence that we will be protected, we begin to protect each other. Solidarity is where we find our safety. Group facilitators have begun to encourage us to create brave space, not safe space, where we can take risks together for the sake of the group's greater strength. To take the risk of saying the wrong thing and learning together in compassionate accountability rather than staying silent or saying anything and then not learning from it. We find our courage together and we use it to move forward together. As I remember it, my last normal day in March 2020, before the world shut down and everything changed, I officiated a burial service for a family not from our congregation. I ate my last restaurant meal for a very long time across the street at Miss Saigon. And when I finished up in the office, I returned to my car to find that some caring soul had left a condom, fresh in its wrapper, tucked under my windshield wiper. I can't make this up. The story I told myself was of a student departing town, like so many others, realizing that they wouldn't get to use their condoms before they expired. And so they left them around town in the hopes that they would do others some good, maybe even bring some joy. It flew off my windshield when I forgot it was there, and I turned on my wipers. And maybe it did some good for the next person who found it. When joy and woe are woven fine, what safety we have comes from one another. These last 5 years have shown us that we never get one crisis or tragedy at a time. And at the same time, joy and beauty persist. Joy and woe are woven fine, and the fabric of them is stronger, more resilient than it may seem at first glance, if we only hold tight to the bonds of protecting each and all, especially those most vulnerable. We know how to do this. It's a lesson we learned if not a blessing we found. We have the fortitude. We need only look into each other's eyes to see it. Spirit of life and death, love and commitment, freedom, justice, and truth, we hold our hearts open to the too muchness. As our hearts break again, may they break open. May we weave ourselves and one another into networks of care that make a better world possible. May it be so. May we make it so. Blessed be. We are about to sing our closing song. You're welcome to stay right where you are and be held in the love of our congregation, or rise, move into a circle along the outer aisles, place your hand over your heart, hold the hands of the person next to you as we sing our closing song. I close this time with the words of Wayne B. Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Go in peace.